Greek mythology has always fascinated us with its mysterious tales of gods and heroes, but could they have roots in real historical events? In this video, we'll decode the origins of Greek mythology, uncovering connections between legendary stories and historical facts, from the city of Troy to the Mycenaean civilization. This journey will unveil mythology's secrets and explore the origin of mythology within ancient civilizations, proving that these stories are not just myths, but also deeply tied to history. If you love exploring history, mythology, and uncovering hidden secrets, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the exciting content coming up. We'll trace mythology back thousands of years, draw connections to Indian epics, and explore its vivid depictions in European art. By the end, we'll dive into key figures, theories, and even modern interpretations, with a special challenge for you. Create your own myths to rival the Greeks. If this sounds like your kind of adventure, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss out on more stories and insights from the world of mythology. To start, let me offer a few thought-provoking ideas. Mythology, at its core, examines the past, the only aspect of time that truly exists. The future remains unknowable, and our understanding of it relies on studying patterns from the past. This is true of science, history, and mythology alike. Scientific theories often evolve as we gather more information. For example, the concepts I learned as a student, Newtonian mechanics, Einstein's theories, have since been refined or expanded, leaving me grappling with quantum mechanics, which feels incomprehensible at times. Similarly, mythology isn't bound by the strict factuality of history. Instead, it engages with stories of the past, recounting events that likely didn't happen, or at least not in the way they're told. This distinguishes it from history, which is rooted in documented occurrences. For instance, consider the Trojan War. It wasn't a literal chronicle of events between 1250 and 1240 BCE in a small town in northwestern Turkey. The Trojans indeed inhabited a city, Ilium, not Troy as many believe, but mythology transforms these facts into a narrative far removed from historical reality. People often blur the lines between history and mythology, drawn to the idea of pinpointing mythical events on a historical timeline. For example, the Greek historian Herodotus claimed to know the exact date Troy fell, on the 12th of Thargelion, approximately May 7th. But attempting to link myth and history in this way is more about creative speculation than fact, akin to searching for the Holy Grail. While history recounts verifiable events, mythology delves deeper into the human psyche, revealing timeless truths about human behavior, societal norms, and morality. It acts as a kind of psychological experiment, offering insights into our nature that endure across generations. To organize this clip, I'll begin with Greek mythology, exploring its origins, which can be traced back as far as 3500 BCE. Then we'll briefly glance at Rome and European art before turning to modern interpretations and theories. Greek mythology, as we know it, emerged during a period steeped in history, with traditional dates like the first Olympic Games in 776 BCE marking the beginning of Greek time. Key moments in this timeline include Homer and Hesiod, circa 730–650 BCE, Athenian tragedies, 460 to 406 BCE, and the cultural zenith of Periclean Athens, 450 BCE. Greek mythology, however, predates all of this, originating in Mycenaean Greece and drawing from even older traditions. The fascinating connection between Greek mythology and older narratives becomes apparent when we compare it to other epic traditions, such as the Indian Mahabharata. This Sanskrit epic, monumental in scale, 8 times the combined length of the Iliad and Odyssey, dates back to approximately 1400 to 1000 BCE. Its events mirror many elements of Homeric epics, from the divine nature of heroes to the catastrophic wars marking the end of heroic ages. The Mahabharata recounts the tale of the Pandavas, semi-divine heroes battling the Kauravas in the climactic battle of Kurukshetra. The parallels with Homer's Trojan War are striking. Both feature themes of exile, suitors competing for a bride, and a climactic war to resolve grievances. These similarities suggest a shared cultural heritage, likely stemming from the Indo-European migrations around 3500 BCE. This ancient group, from which many modern languages descended, carried myths and stories as they spread across Europe and Asia. This diffusion explains why certain linguistic and cultural elements, such as the word for three in languages like Greek, Sanskrit, and English, share common roots. In contrast, unrelated languages like Hebrew or Hungarian lack these similarities. By tracing mythology back to its Indo-European origins, we uncover a shared narrative tradition that predates historical divisions, highlighting the interconnectedness of human cultures. As we proceed, I'll delve deeper into these connections and explore how mythology, both ancient and modern, continues to resonate with us today. Now, if we trace individual words back to a language from the 4th millennium BCE, we can do more than just track their linguistic evolution. We can also piece together the lives of the people who spoke them. They had words for tools like plows, fields, wagons, and wheels, giving us a glimpse into their fundamentally agricultural society. These people were settled farmers, familiar with the rhythms of peace and war, and they thrived in the Neolithic era, or the New Stone Age. While still rooted in Stone Age technology, their settled lifestyle laid the groundwork for the myths that would eventually evolve into Greek mythology. If they had words, they could form sentences. And if they could form sentences, they could certainly tell stories. And storytelling traditions aren't exclusive to Greeks and Indians. Other cultures, such as the Celts, had their poets too. The Celtic term bard, from which our word bard is derived, reflects a long-standing oral tradition of poetry and myth-making. Scholars like M.L. West have even attempted to reconstruct the metrical patterns of these ancient poetic forms. All of this suggests that what we now call Greek mythology, with its surprising parallels in Indian epics, has roots that stretch much farther back, perhaps thousands of years earlier, to a much more primitive stage of society. This raises a fascinating question for historians. How could these early societies, long before cities as we know them, have myths centered on the capture of cities? The answer lies in the linguistic evidence. Words like the Sanskrit pur, as in Hastinapur, are strikingly similar to the Greek polis, city-state, suggesting these societies had some form of proto-urban life. But before they settled into agricultural stability, it's likely their myths would have revolved around figures akin to Hercules, heroes tied to survival and individual feats, rather than the city-conquering warriors of the Iliad. The warriors of epic poetry, however, are complex figures. Any student of Homer will be familiar with the concept of the heroic code. These heroes weren't concerned with morality as we understand it. Instead, their primary focus was on their honor, reputation, and duty, concepts not unlike the Dharma described in the Mahabharata. These epics share a preoccupation with the ethical dilemmas faced by warriors, who are constantly torn between conflicting duties and values. In Greek tragedy, this moral uncertainty is at the heart of the drama, as characters wrestle with the question, what is the right thing to do? Contrary to the notion that early epics celebrated unbridled glory in battle, the Greek epics and their Indian counterparts are filled with misery, conflict, and tragedy. These stories depict war and heroism not as sources of triumph, but as deeply flawed endeavors. Take, for example, the character of Tydeus, father of Diomedes. A valiant warrior in the war against Thebes, Tydeus impressed Athena so much that she descended from Olympus with nectar to grant him immortality. But as she approached, She saw him consumed by battle fury, eating the brains of his defeated enemy. Horrified, Athena turned back, leaving him to die as a mortal. This grim tale from the now-lost Thebaid reminds us of the darker lessons mythology seeks to impart. Georges Dumézil, a French scholar, constructed an elaborate theory about Indo-European societies that linked the sins of epic heroes across cultures. While controversial, his ideas shed light on a recurring theme. Major heroes, whether Heracles, Achilles, or Indian figures, committed egregious acts that often violated their society's deepest values. In Heracles' case, he murdered his guest friend, an act considered worse than matricide in Greek culture. This theme of moral transgression underscores the tragic dimension of these myths. Even the supposed triumphs of mythological wars, like the Trojan War, are anything but celebratory. Unlike modern historical wars, where victories are often met with public jubilation, mythological wars end in catastrophe. After the sack of Troy, the victorious Greeks faced divine wrath and personal tragedy. Ajax desecrated the temple of Athena by assaulting Cassandra, triggering a storm that scattered the Greek fleet. Menelaus was blown off course to Egypt, and Odysseus spent 10 years wandering before finally returning home. Meanwhile, Agamemnon returned to Argos only to be murdered by his wife. These are not tales of glory. They are narratives of decay, failure, and the inescapable consequences of human actions. This theme of post-war decline is not exclusive to Greek mythology. In the Mahabharata, Krishna, after leading his people to victory, witnesses their society fall into internal conflict, culminating in a devastating civil war. The survivors are then wiped out by a tsunami. Mythology, whether Greek or Indian, portrays war not as a resolution, but as the beginning of the end, a tragic decline that mirrors the essence of Greek tragedy itself. Greek tragedy, as Aeschylus famously said, is but slices of Homer, drawing directly from the grim and chaotic events of Greek myth. While tragedy might seem to amplify the despair of these stories, it remains true to the spirit of mythology, which is inherently tragic. The myths are filled with amoral, grotesque, and unsettling events, yet they resonate because they reflect the darker truths of human nature. As we look to the future, which is often framed as brighter and more progressive, it's worth remembering that Greek mythology was deeply rooted in its local traditions and its tragic outlook on life. These myths often originated as local stories tied to specific places, like Thebes or Mycenae. They were not consciously set in these locations by some grand authorial plan. Rather, they emerged organically from the local imagination. Over time, however, these stories transcended their local origins. The tragedy Oedipus the King may have started as a Theban tale, but it gained international acclaim, much like a local story going global. Sophocles' later work, Oedipus at Colonus, even ties the myth to a suburb of Athens, showing how these traditions adapted and spread. As Greek culture expanded, particularly after the conquests of Alexander the Great, myths began to transcend their local roots. The establishment of the Great Library of Alexandria in 310 BCE by Ptolemy I exemplifies this shift toward preserving and systematizing knowledge. Here, scrolls containing myths were carefully catalogued, ensuring that these stories would endure for future generations. Despite the Christian Church's theological objections to pagan myths, they recognized their cultural significance, preserving them in medieval scriptoria. By the Renaissance, mythology became another landscape for artists and sculptors to explore, expanding the scope of cultural expression. While medieval art often focused on religious devotion, the Renaissance opened the door to mythological themes, merging the sacred and the secular. From frescoes in Catalonia to sculptures inspired by classical myths, the art of this period reflected a broader, richer engagement with the stories of antiquity, ensuring that Greek mythology remained alive and relevant in the evolving tapestry of human culture. Moving into the Renaissance, we see a shift in how mythology was portrayed in art. By the 1470s and 1480s, classical mythology had become a significant source of inspiration, with wealthy patrons commissioning works for their palaces. One fascinating example is a painting of Apollo pursuing Daphne, capturing the poetic moment where her arms transform into branches. Mythology, once purely narrative, was now being brought to life in visual art, celebrated not only for its decorative appeal, but also for its symbolic, often mystical meanings. One of the most iconic artists of this period was Botticelli, whose works encapsulate the fusion of classical myth and artistic innovation. In Primavera, we see the tale of the nymph Chloris, who, pursued by the west wind, transforms into Flora, the goddess of flowers. The painting exudes life and beauty, translating myth into a vibrant, living art form, while also hinting at deeper, Neoplatonic ideas. These ideas, often esoteric and encoded, reflect the intellectual climate of the time, though their precise meanings remain elusive. At the same time, mythology was finding new platforms in literature and sculpture. Boccaccio's Genealogia Deorum Gentilium, 1360, was a groundbreaking work that catalogued pagan myths for a Renaissance audience, becoming an essential reference for scholars and artists alike. Sculptors like Bernini also brought mythology to life in works like Apollo and Daphne, 1625, and The Rape of Proserpina, blending drama and movement to capture the tension of these ancient stories. Yet, it's important to note that this embrace of myth didn't replace religion. Artists and patrons often navigated both worlds simultaneously, creating works steeped in both Christian and classical traditions. The Renaissance also gave rise to a more intellectual appreciation of myth, particularly through its connection to place and history. This period marked the internationalization of mythological art, as seen in the frescoes of Giulio Romano at the Palazzo del Te in Mantua. These stunning works, depicting the battle between giants and gods, showcase mythology as a shared cultural heritage, one that tied classical learning to contemporary art. Mantua, Virgil's birthplace, became a pilgrimage site for lovers of both mythology and Italian culture, symbolizing the enduring relevance of these ancient stories. Moving into modernity, the study of myth underwent profound changes. The word myth, as a technical term, didn't emerge until 1783, coined by scholars like Gotthold Ephraim Lessing, who laid the foundation for the scientific study of mythology. This opened the door for figures like Friedrich Kreutzer and Max Müller to explore myths as cultural artifacts, embedding them in broader narratives about the human experience. Kreutzer's work, for instance, linked Greek myths to mystic traditions of the East, while Müller interpreted them as reflections of natural phenomena, such as the sun and clouds. Although his conclusions often leaned toward the overly poetic, they highlighted the universal appeal of myth as a way to interpret the world. Psychoanalytic approaches also gained prominence, most notably through Freud, who famously coined the term Oedipus complex based on his reading of Greek myth. Freud viewed mythology as a mirror of the subconscious, offering insights into human desires, fears, and conflicts. Structuralism, championed by Claude Lévi-Strauss, took a different tack, analyzing myths as systems of thought that revealed the structures of human society and culture. These interpretations, whether psychological or structural, underscored mythology's continued relevance as a lens through which to understand humanity. In today's world, mythology thrives in new forms. Advertising, for instance, borrows heavily from mythic imagery. Shampoo ads evoke purity and natural beauty, while car commercials channel themes of power and freedom. Roland Barthes, a pioneer in semiotics, explored the mythologies of modern life, analyzing cultural phenomena like steak and chips or the Citroën DS to reveal how they functioned as modern myths, connecting people to broader symbolic meanings. Narratives in film and television also carry mythic power. Westerns, detective thrillers, soap operas, and even science fiction tap into archetypal stories, creating modern sagas that resonate with ancient themes of heroism, conflict, and morality. Period dramas, with their focus on class, duty, and tragedy, echo the spirit of classical mythology and bring its timeless themes into a contemporary setting. Remarkably, Greek mythology has endured through centuries of cultural change. It remains a cornerstone of Western thought, appearing in art, literature, and popular culture. It continues to captivate audiences, providing a rich source of inspiration and a tool for understanding human nature. Mythology allows us to think deeply, to question, and to connect with the past in meaningful ways. So, as we study mythology today, we aren't just recounting stories. We're exploring their meanings, their origins, and their enduring impact on the human imagination. Greek mythology, in particular, remains a testament to the power of storytelling. It compels us to ask, why do these myths exist? What do they tell us about ourselves? In answering these questions, mythology proves itself to be more than a relic of the past. It is a living tradition that continues to shape our world. Thank you very much.